What's up, guys? Welcome to the first episode of Gamescript for the 2024 season. We're looking at the Baltimore Ravens at the Kansas City Chiefs. We got a total of 46.5 points with Baltimore as 3-point dogs in this one. It's a rematch of the championship game for the AFC last season, where Kansas City actually upset the Baltimore Ravens and beat them. It seemed like a game that was going to be close, or Baltimore had a good chance of winning the way that Kansas City played all last season, but that did not happen. And in today's game, we're talking about two completely different teams, and I'm going to get into some plays that I think we can put in the captain that will be sneaky or under-owned depending on how ownership shakes out. So I'm going to get into that right after this. What's up, guys? Simon Edwards at Pumacom here with Heat Seeker Sports, and you're watching the first episode of Gamescript for the 2024 season. Baltimore at Kansas City, like I discussed at the open of the show. Make sure to hit the like button on this video. Make sure to subscribe to the channel. We're going to be putting on all sorts of showdown shows and showdown content this season, so you're going to want to subscribe to the channel. We're first pretty much to the market with this episode on this particular game. I haven't seen a lot of content discussing Showdown for the game that we're talking about here. It's the first game of the season. It's Monday, so things may change by Thursday on some of the stuff that I talk about. So you're going to want to subscribe to the YouTube channel to make sure that you're seeing at least the short video that I put out later in the week. In order to trigger that, I'm going to need 20 likes on this video. So hit the like button so I can put out a shorter video later on in the week to discuss more detail once we get more information in as the week goes by for this game. So we're talking about a rematch, as I mentioned, of the AFC Championship game between the Baltimore Ravens and the Kansas City Chiefs. That was a very low-scoring game. It ended up being 10-17 in favor of the Chiefs. And obviously that knocked out Baltimore, who were favorites to go to the Super Bowl last year, but they once again could not pull it off in the playoffs. And so Kansas City went on to their, I believe it was like their second or third consecutive Super Bowl win. I've lost track at this point. But we're talking about two completely different teams this year. Baltimore has lost their defensive coordinator, and Kansas City has lost Ladarius Sneed. So the defenses are going to look completely different in this game. And that's going to be interesting because previous games that we've seen against the Chiefs and the Ravens, we've seen last year, or 2021, we saw 36-35, which was won by Baltimore. In 2020, we saw Baltimore lose 34-20. We saw Baltimore lose 33-28 back in 2019, and we saw Kansas City beat Baltimore 27-24 back in 2018. These are all Lamar Jackson games going off against Steve Spagnuolo. So we have a consistent performance by Lamar Jackson against his Chiefs defense, run by the same defensive coordinator throughout that period, or at least 4 out of those 5 games. So Lamar Jackson's performances in those games, he had 20.6 points in the playoffs last season. He had 37 points, 16.5 points, 21 points, and 21 points. So you can figure Lamar Jackson's probably going to get at least 20 points in this game. But that does not necessarily make him a captain option. We're going to go take a look at the player pool here. Lamar Jackson, we're looking at the most expensive guy on the board. He's salary, if you want to put him in the captain, is going to be 17-1. And he really, for 20 DraftKings points, that really doesn't justify having him at that price. And there's going to be a few other options that we have in this game that have better matchups and that have a significant opportunity to be the captain options that pay off in this matchup. And it's going to give us salary relief too. It's going to give us more options to build our team. So I'll just go through the player pool here while I'm doing this. Patrick Mahomes, Patrick Mahomes has done. Last year he was a very down year for him, but we're talking about a different Chiefs offense this year. They have a lot more speed on this offense, and we don't have Ladarius Sneed on that defense anymore. So there might be a significant downgrade on the defense this year, and I'm not going to assume that this is going to be a low-scoring game with the changes that have been made in the offseason. And Patrick Mahomes, I've been drafting a lot of him in best ball because I was anticipating him having a bounce-back season this year. If you watch my shows in the past, last year I did not like the Chiefs at all. And I just didn't like their offense at all. Their offense wasn't performing. Patrick Mahomes didn't have guys he could throw to consistently. And it was just every time we had a showdown episode with the Chiefs, it's just a mess because there was very difficult to project who was going to go off on a given week. It was very spread around offense and everything like that to a bunch of wide receivers who were just not that good. And Travis Kelce mixed in there. Travis Kelce was injured through the majority of last season on top of it, in addition to being an older player at this point. So I think when the Chiefs added some speed in the offseason, Xavier Worthy and Hollywood Brown is out for this game, or he's doubtful at this point, but it's looking like he's going to be out for this game. But Kansas City's been trying to get speed on the team ever since they lost Tyreek Hill. And ever since they lost Tyreek Hill, they've gotten off to, not typical Chiefs starts to the season. So I'm going to take a look right now. We'll take a look at how they've done at the start of the season for the past couple years since they've lost Tyreek Hill, and see if we can paint a picture here. So if we're looking at Pro Football Reference, we're going to put. We don't need to put that. So we're looking at the last couple years of Patrick Mahomes. Last year, they lost their first game against Detroit. They went on a little bit of a winning streak there, but like at the end of the season, it ended up being like a pretty rough season for them. If you look back 2 years, they got off to they won the first 2 games. They lost the third game. They lost a few games towards the top of the season in 2022. And, then 2021, they won the first game, lost a couple, they went off to their roughest start was in 2021, basically. Take a look at who their lineup was there. I believe Tyreek was on the team that year. Yep, Tyreek was still on the team at that point. But, like the last couple years, they haven't been as high-powered in offense, and basically they've been wanting to get speed to make up for Tyreek Hill. And I think that's a situation that's going to benefit a guy, Xavier Worthy, the most. Because if we scroll down here, Xavier Worthy, he's 8,700 at the captain position. He's a fast wide receiver. We know that the Chiefs, they love to show off their weapons. They love to show off their little moves and stuff, the behind the back pass and everything like that. That was kind of cheesy, but a defense could easily defend something like that. And the ring around the rosy thing that they did a couple years ago, a lot of cheesy stuff that they try to show off, but they also like to, I think they want to show off this weapon they have in Xavier Worthy. And I would not be surprised to see Xavier Worthy come out of the gates hot, especially with Hollywood Brown missing. I'll tell you a little bit about the matchup that he has with Baltimore giving up 16 DraftKings points a game last season to the wide receiver position, the wideouts. The slot position was a weaker position. That's 15.4 DraftKings points a game they were giving up to the slot. But Rashee Rice is the guy who runs most of his routes in the slot. And if we look at Rashee Rice's performance last year in the playoffs against his same team, we'll take a look back at Pro Football Reference. We're going to look at Rashee Rice. Going to take a look at what he did in last year's playoff game. So you can see against Baltimore, Rashee Rice in the slot had 9 targets, 8 receptions, only 46 yards. So he did not, he got a lot of targets, but he did not, perform very well with them. Travis Kelce ended up having the big game. You can see he got 11 targets, 11 receptions, 116 yards, and a touchdown. So big game for Travis Kelce, but not so good for Rashee Rice. I think that it'll be similar story with this game for Rashee Rice in as far as, I just don't see him having a great game in this matchup. And that's where I like Xavier Worthy, because I think that Baltimore's probably going to put a little bit more attention on Travis Kelce. I don't hate Travis Kelce in this game. He could easily, be the guy that you need. But I do think that Kelce's, talked about earlier, he's getting older. Last game against Baltimore, he had 32 DraftKings points. He went on a tear for the entire playoffs last year. 18 DraftKings points against San Francisco, 32 against Baltimore, 24.5 against Buffalo, and 14.1 against Miami. But if you look at his regular season, he really did not look like the old Travis Kelce. He had a little stretch there, it looks like, against the Chargers. He had 38 DraftKings points. Against Denver, he had 24 division opponents there, 22 versus Minnesota. And then, he had 12 against the Jets, 19.9 against Chicago, and 12.6 against Jacksonville. As far as the points allowed by Baltimore to tight ends last season, they only allowed 12 DraftKings points a game to tight ends last season. So it wasn't a really great matchup for Kelce, even though he outperformed. But like I said, like Xavier Worthy is the guy that I'm interested in this week from at least a captain perspective. If we're looking further down this player pool, we're looking at Derrick Henry. Baltimore got criticized pretty heavily last year for their playoff performance because they were facing Kansas City, who was weakest against the run. And yet Baltimore came out with a pass-heavy approach. They, I think, dropped back at like a 80% rate or something ridiculous, and they did not perform. Like, Kansas City's defense did exactly what you would expect them to, and they just dominated that matchup. And Baltimore, by the time they had an opportunity to change their mind and go to the run, they were already too far behind to do anything about it. So they weren't able to revert to the run game. But we're talking about a team that has replaced Gus Edwards with Derrick Henry, and Derrick Henry is still performing at a high level. You can see in games where the team is still in the actual game, he scored 24 DraftKings points against Tennessee. Against Houston, he did not 24 DraftKings points. Well, he was with Tennessee, obviously, so that wasn't the case. So that's a little weird on this DraftKings setup here. But he scored 24.3 DraftKings points in the Week 18, 4.2 in Week 17 against Houston, where they lost 26-3, where they kept the game close in Week 16. He ended up having 21.38 DraftKings points, and you can kind of see the pattern here. If they're staying close in the games, then you can expect Derrick Henry to have a decent game. We're talking about a 3-point spread here, so I would not be surprised if they make up for the mistakes Baltimore made last season in that playoff game, and kind of revert to Derrick Henry to try to control this game a little bit better and attack the weakness of Baltimore, especially after all the criticism they got for not attacking that weakness against Kansas City last season. So expect Derrick Henry to be firmly in play this week, and he is at a captain salary of 13.5. I'm going to get back into flex here. So Derrick Henry's regular salary is going to be $9K. Salary is a little bit soft this week. I think they do that, for the first game every season to draw in people who might not normally be interested in showdowns or DFS in general. So the pricing is a little bit soft, depending on who you use as the captain. So you can probably build a pretty decent lineup this week, which is why it makes it important for having guys like Xavier Worthy as an option for a captain option. He's only at 5,800 for his flex price. Isiah Pacheco, I'm not too interested in Isiah Pacheco. Baltimore was pretty solid against the run last year. They allowed 21.7 DraftKings points a game, but I just 22.6 DraftKings points a game against the run, but I'm just not seeing this necessarily as a Pacheco game. We can check and see what Pacheco did in that AFC Championship game last year. He had 24 attempts for 68 yards and a touchdown. The situation with Worthy might open things up a little bit more for Pacheco, but as of Monday afternoon, I'm not too interested in Pacheco in this game. If we're looking further down, and this is all going to be dependent on ownership too, because I haven't seen any ownership projections come out yet. So I'm kind of flying blind with ownership, which makes it all the more important to subscribe to the channel to get information coming in later in the week where we can do another analysis where we're kind of taking stuff like that into account. This is an early look at the game. And next, we're looking at Zay Flowers. Zay Flowers is a guy that I do like in this game. Zay Flowers had a nice game against Kansas City in the championship game. He had 24.9 DraftKings points, 5 receptions off 8 targets for 115 yards and a touchdown. So he did very well. He had a costly fumble that didn't help them out very much, but Zay Flowers is in a good spot in this game. And especially the way that, Kansas City's defense did against the slot receivers last year. Last year against the slot, they were allowing 18 DraftKings points a game, and that sets up Zay Flowers nicely. I talked about him in the championship game. I wasn't on him in the championship game last year. I kind of ignored the weak spot in Kansas City's defense, and Zay Flowers ended up going off. So I should have listened to my spreadsheet last year, but the spreadsheet is telling me again this year that Zay Flowers, running 30% of his routes in that slot, is going to have a good opportunity against Kansas City this week. So keep Zay Flowers for sure in your player pools. Looking at the next guy, we got Rashee Rice. I just talked about him. I don't really like him in this matchup. Last game against Baltimore, he had 12.6 DraftKings points, and he's got a lot more target competition on top of it this year. So I am going to probably not have a heavy exposure to Rashee Rice, depending on his ownership. If he ends up being highly owned, that could change the story. Hollywood Brown is doubtful. Mark Andrews is another situation. He has not done well against Kansas City, like historically. If we look at Mark Andrews historically against Kansas City, we'll take a look there. He's another guy that they've been able to shut down. Like in addition to, they haven't shut down Lamar, but Lamar hasn't done his best games against Kansas City. So let's take a look at how Mark Andrews has done versus Kansas City in the past. We're looking at 5 receptions, 5 targets for 57 yards. It's about 10 DraftKings points. 8 targets, 3 receptions, 22 yards. That's about 5, and he had a fumble, so take a point away from that. 7 targets, 3 receptions, 15 yards. So he's done horrible against Kansas City in the past. They've been able to shut him down. So that puts even more focus on Zay Flowers for me. having that historic look at Mark Andrews versus Steve Spagnuolo's defense. So Carson Wentz, we can ignore that if we're scrolling down past these quarterbacks. Xavier Worthy, like I mentioned, is a guy that I'm interested in. If we're looking at the performance of the championship game last year, we can get an idea maybe of who they were Chiefs were targeting. So Rashee Rice had 9 targets. They had 5 targets to Noah Gray, the backup tight end. So they were targeting tight end very heavily last year in that game. 16 total targets to tight ends. So that's an interesting thing to note. And then they had that 9 targets to the slot position. So the thing with Kansas City, though, is their yards per attempt were way down last year because they didn't have any reliable outside receivers. So, don't be surprised if they start turning to their outside receiving weapons this season now that they've gotten some competent speed on the outside. Valdez-Scantling had 2 targets, 2 receptions for 38 yards. He'd be as close to an outside guy, I guess, as you can get. 2 targets to Justin Watson for 1 reception and 16 yards. So, they did target outside receivers against Baltimore last year. They just did not have competent weapons that they could really do some damage with. So that's a reason why I like Xavier Worthy. Another reason is he's looked good in the preseason. On top of that, he seems to be forming a good connection with Patrick Mahomes already. Historically, Patrick Mahomes, it's taken him a while to get adjusted to new receivers or to get new receivers adjusted to that offense. But Xavier Worthy, they've been desperate to get competent speed on the outside. So Xavier Worthy is a guy that is high on my radar this week. And we'll build our alternative lineup with Xavier Worthy in mind. Rashad Bateman, not really interested there. He's had plenty of opportunities and he hasn't really done anything with it. But he's a guy that you can keep in your player pool. I don't like him at 5,200, especially. Justin Tucker is a guy I'd much rather prefer over a guy like Bateman. Justin Tucker, always Mr. Consistency. Let's see what he did. He didn't do anything really against Kansas City last year, only 5 DraftKings points. But, Justin Tucker is a reliable kicker in a game that should be relatively close. And I'm not anticipating Kansas City's defense being as good as it was last year on top of it. So Justin Tucker, I'm not going to shy away from. Not going to shy away from Harrison Butker either. Same reasons. I think the Kansas City Chiefs are going to move the ball a lot better this year. And I think that they're going to be in scoring position a lot more, which is going to set up Butker. He only had 7 DraftKings points against the Ravens last year. So if you're anticipating a lower scoring game, you might want to consider Butker even more, even though he only had 7 DraftKings points against them last year. Justice Hill is anticipated to be the receiving back in this offense, but every time we get hype on Justice Hill, he doesn't really deliver. Last year, you can see he only had a handful of weeks where he delivered over double-digit points, and that's not going to cut it in Showdown, not for a guy whose price is $4,400. He's priced more expensive than the Ravens D and the Chiefs D, who, I would take either of those as a flyer over Justice Hill. Although I don't know that I'm going to have much exposure to either D in this game because I think it's going to be a higher scoring game than we saw in the championship game for sure. So let's take a look at our next guy, Nelson Agholor. Agholor had a few decent weeks last season in this offense, but again, just a handful of weeks over double-digit points. So I'm not overly enthusiastic about Nelson Agholor. Justin Watson, I think he's going to be basically obsolete with Worthy and Hollywood when they're both in the offense. But Justin Watson is a guy that Mahomes has relied on in the past, but I just don't see it in this game. In the last game against Baltimore, he had 2.6 DraftKings points. Edwards-Helaire is out. That's good for Pacheco, even better for Pacheco. P. Ryan is bad for Pacheco. I think he's going to be involved more in the passing game. And I think that's going to take some attempts away from Pacheco. Although Pacheco was on the field a lot more when Jerick McKinnon was out last year. So if Samaje Perine, being new to the team, has not caught up with the playbook yet, then I would expect to see Pacheco getting a lot more opportunity than we're used to. But Perine is only 3K, and he could be a decent part of the team with his receiving ability. So Isaiah Likely is pretty cheap. He's at 2,600. There was some talk in the offseason about getting him more integrated, especially with the way that he performed when Mark Andrews was out last year. Just about every week he played without Andrews, he scored double-digit points last year. So really solid performance by Likely, made a case for himself to be a bigger part of this offense. And he's only 2,600. So he's definitely going to be a guy we're going to leave in for salary relief, even though the Chiefs did really well against tight end last year. But if they're focused on Andrews, if they got 2 tight end sets, a decent amount, which I wouldn't be surprised, then I wouldn't be surprised to see Likely step up in that situation there and have a decent showing. All right, next up is Devontae Walker, who is a rookie on the team. He had a little bit of hype. It looks like he was hurt with a rib injury in the preseason. I don't know much about Devontae Walker or how he's going to be integrated into this offense, but he's something that we can keep an eye out on beat reporters and stuff like that to kind of get a better feel for how they're going to use him. Let's see. Rookie 4th-round pick has only 1 target and no receptions through 2 preseason games and doesn't seem to have gotten any snaps before halftime. It wasn't used heavily in the preseason. He's pretty low in the depth chart. He's probably a guy that we can ignore in the early part of the season. Sky Moore, one of these speedster guys that never really delivered. Sky Moore, I would keep him in my player pool just because he was out as of week 15 last year. He looks like he got hurt and he was out for the season week 15. So keep an eye on the injury report. I don't know what his injury status is, but Sky Moore could be a guy that's interesting for salary relief. Keaton Mitchell is out. Hardman is a guy that was the hero of the Super Bowl last year, scored that game-winning touchdown and didn't do anything against Baltimore. He was on the Jets for a good portion of last season and then went back to the Chiefs as they made their run in the playoffs in the Super Bowl. So Mecole Hardman, he's a guy that could, have those random games. But this is the thing that we didn't like about the Chiefs last year, having to pick these rando wide receivers to figure out which guy was going to give us the score that we needed to be in the optimal lineup for these showdown slates. Noah Gray, same thing. He had those what was it, like 5 targets against Baltimore last year, but really he's a guy that doesn't do anything, doesn't contribute enough for us to be interested in. And looking down a little bit further, Deontay Hardy might be interesting at 800. He's on the Ravens now. A few years back for the Saints, he was really good. He didn't do anything for Buffalo last year, and it could be more of the same this year, but he did have a couple good seasons, or at least one good season with the Saints, where he has a lot of speed and he has some good ability. So Deontay Hardy, maybe keep him in your player pool, see what his status is. I don't know how integrated into the team he is, if he'll be on the bench or if he'll be inactive or whatever. Just keep an eye on Deontay Hardy, but he's a speedy option if you need salary relief, and he's going to be playing. Other than that, I don't really see anyone else I'm too interested in on this slate. So we can get into building our lineup and projecting our script. For this first one, I think the favorite's obviously going to be Kansas City. So I think in that situation, we got to pick a chalky captain. If we're building a chalkier lineup, I'm going to go with Kelce. Going to go with Mahomes. Kelce and the captain. Going to go with Mahomes in there. Going to go with Jackson because with Lamar Jackson, he's going to be giving you, if not a captain score, he's going to likely be giving you the points that you need in your optimal lineup. Very hard to fade him in a situation like this. I'm going to go ahead and put Worthy in there just because he's probably the cheapest starter. And with Hollywood out, I wouldn't be surprised to see him have that decent game like I was talking about. So we got Worthy, Mahomes, and Kelce on the Kansas City side. If we're looking at Baltimore here, if we wanted to get Flowers in there, leaves us with no salary, we'd have to make a tough decision on one of these quarterbacks if we wanted to go in this direction. Maybe we assume, maybe Mahomes we leave in there, and maybe we get Jackson out, knowing his performances against this defense in the past. Maybe we put in Derrick Henry instead. Let's say they take a run-heavy approach. This isn't going to be a chalky lineup, by the way, without Lamar Jackson in it, but it's a lineup with the the chalk as far as outcome for this game, where Kansas City is likely to take it. So you can have a build like this, and then you have options like Sky Moore, McCole Hardman, and guys like that. If you want to go in that direction, you got Deontay Hardy, like we just talked about. Devontae Walker. So you do have options there. None of them are very attractive. You're going to have to check in later in the week to see, which of those scrubby guys they're talking about going to be, active for the game and like potential contributors in the game. So that's a direction that you can go. If you wanted to take Mahomes out and put Lamar in instead, you'd be left with even less money. Let's say we wanted to take Derrick Henry out, and maybe we put in Pacheco instead. That leaves us with 2K, kind of in that same scrubby range. If you wanted to take Worthy out, if you don't believe in Worthy, and you wanted to put in that Kansas City defense, let's say the Chiefs defense does pretty well, that leaves you with 4,200. You could put in the Ravens D. You could put in Nelson Aguilar. You have Justin Watson as an option, P. Ryan. That opens things up like a lot more. It gives you Likely as an option. Let's put in Likely. Let's see what that would give us if we wanted to take out that Chiefs defense. That leaves you with kicker options too. So there's another way to build. There's a few ways that you can go with that Kelce build, especially if you wanted to go with fading Mahomes. Fading one of these quarterbacks is going to give you a lot of options. But let's go clear this out, and let's give us a Xavier Worthy lineup here. So I like Worthy. I like Flowers. And obviously, I'm going to like these two quarterbacks. If I wanted to use Derrick Henry, I'm left with 2,600. So I'm right underneath, getting a guy like Likely in there. So if I wanted to switch things up a little bit, I think okay, so if we're using the Chiefs, if we want to build a game script around like a potential Chiefs, I think this direction is a little bit of a tighter game where, you got both teams are in it. That's why Derrick Henry's in this lineup. If you're using Derrick Henry, you're normally using it for a game that you think is going to be close, or you think that Baltimore is going to be able to run away with it. And, I think, this game is going to be close. That's kind of what I'm projecting for it. So I like using Derrick Henry. But if we want to get rid of a guy, let's say we get rid of Mahomes. well, no, I got Mahomes in there with Word. Let's say we get rid of Jackson. Let's say Jackson has, like a 16-point game instead of a 20-point game. So we got Derrick Henry, we got Flowers representing Baltimore in there. We got Mahomes to Worthy. If we wanted to add another Chief in here, let's say we want to add Kelce in there. That leaves us with 4,300. I like this direction a lot because that way we can get, maybe the Chiefs defense in there, or maybe we can get, the Baltimore's defense in there, whichever one you prefer. I don't really have a preference on those defenses because I think we're looking at completely different defenses, but maybe with this being a home game, maybe we can plug in the Chiefs defense. But if you want the correlation with Henry, you can plug in the Ravens defense. You can really make a case for any direction here. If you wanted to put in, let's say we switch it up a bit. Let's say we go, if we take out Derrick Henry, put in Isiah Pacheco, that's going to leave us with 4,900. We can still get Butker in there. That's going to be an onslaught. I don't really like an onslaught in this particular game. You could put in the Ravens D in there too. Like stuff like that. If we didn't want the onslaught, we could take Kelce out, and maybe Pacheco we put in instead. I already got him in there. So if we want Mahomes to Worthy, Mahomes isn't in the captain because he's only supporting one wide receiver or one receiver, let's say. We got Pacheco and we got Flowers. Let's get Derrick Henry in there. That's going to leave us with 5,500. Again, we're having to fade one of those quarterbacks here, but, we got it explained with Derrick Henry is running in the touchdowns. Maybe they're going a little bit run heavy with Derrick Henry. We still got Flowers to support the passing game to, keep this game close. And we got Mahomes throwing to Worthy. That's why Worthy is in the captain. That's why Mahomes is in the lineup, because we got Worthy in the captain, and Mahomes being in the lineup would justify having a receiver in there. But we also got Pacheco to justify why Mahomes isn't in the captain option and why he does not have two receivers. It's because maybe they're getting it close to the goal line and Pacheco is running in a touchdown or two. Xavier Worthy, maybe they're launching bombs to him all night, or maybe he gets a decent yardage total, maybe 120 yards, and let's say a touchdown. That's going to justify a captain usage for him on top of his low salary. But we got a good build here with Worthy and the captain, having to fade Lamar. But, it gives us options with Justin Tucker, Harrison Butker, Justice Hill, if you wanted to do that. Although I wouldn't put Hill in there with Henry. And you got both defenses on top of that. So there's a lot of options there. If you want to take out Henry and put in Lamar, leaves us with 3,100 in this build, and 3,100 will get you, P. Ryan as an option. Although I don't like P. Ryan and Pacheco together, gives you Likely as an option, which is pretty good. You leave 500 on the board with that, and you get a decent player. But my favorite players on the slate as of Monday afternoon are Xavier Worthy. I really like Xavier Worthy. I really like Zay Flowers. The quarterbacks you can fade either one. You don't need to have both quarterbacks in this game based on historic performances. But, if you want to put both quarterbacks in, there are options to do that. This might be a game where it makes more sense to go one quarterback just based on historic performances, like I said, the defenses that they're playing, and also, salary constraints. So I think that's probably a direction that I would be more likely to go. And I just don't know which one of them I would fade just yet. I would probably lean towards fading Mahomes more likely, just because Jackson, like we've seen, his floor is basically 20 points against the Chiefs. Even though he hasn't done outstanding against the Chiefs, 20 points is a nice floor to have. Mahomes, his floor is closer to 15 or so against a good defense. And, it's going to kind of depend on, how he does in the passing game, obviously with Kelce and Rashee Rice and Worthy. He's got 3 options in the passing game. So, yeah, I mean, that does make it a little bit more difficult to fade Mahomes. But if you can build a story around, Lamar Jackson not being in the optimal, maybe Derrick Henry takes a lot of Lamar Jackson's upside away because they finally have like a really good running back to work into their game plan. And Henry is obviously, like a between the tackles grinder type of guy. And he's a guy that is going to relieve Lamar Jackson a lot from having to do a lot of rushing. But the threat of Lamar Jackson will also open things up significantly for Derrick Henry. So as we're talking through this a little bit more, maybe it is Lamar that makes more sense to fade playing on the road. So let's put Derrick Henry back in there. Mahomes, Worthy, Pacheco. You could swap Pacheco out for Kelce and have 4,300 left over. Still got those defense options and Nelson Aguilar and stuff like that. So, Worthy just opens up a lot of options for you if you decide to go with Worthy. And he's very cheap in the captain option. And I think that his ownership should be pretty low because he is a rookie on the team. Not a lot of people are onto him yet. And if you haven't been drafting best ball, you haven't really seen, probably followed, like what he's done throughout the preseason and how impressive he's looked and stuff like that. So it makes a lot of sense to use Worthy in some capacity in your lineups this week. So that's it for this week. Make sure to subscribe to the page. You'll get updates on, when videos are coming out. I'll probably put, my next one out on Wednesday, like a shorter video out on Wednesday on this game. Get me to those 20 likes and that'll trigger a short video. So that short video, I'll name a captain. It's usually about a minute long because I put it on YouTube Shorts. I'll name a captain and 3 other picks that I'm locking into my lineups or like at least going to have heaviest exposure to. So you're going to want to check out that video later on in the week. Subscribe to the channel, like the video to trigger that. Also sign up for Underdog. Underdog, is going to be doing some interesting pick'em contests this year. They got some good deals. I saw they had Travis Kelce. They have a free pick basically on him where his yardage total is 0.5 yards. I also saw, some boosts for guys like Zay Flowers. And if you think Zay Flowers is going to score a touchdown and stuff like that. So make sure to, check out Underdog. They're giving you a 50% deposit match for up to $1,000. So if you deposit $2,000, they're going to give you $1,000. And I'll start integrating some pick'ems into my videos throughout the season to give a little bit more love to Underdog outside of best ball this year. So make sure to check that out and use the promo code SEEK when you make that deposit on Underdog in order to take advantage of that $1,000 deposit bonus, which is crazy because you don't see that anymore. I mean, we're getting like $100 deposit bonus for a long time, and now it's $1,000. If you're depositing $2,000, you get $1,000 because they're matching you up to 50% on your deposit, or they're matching you 50% up to $1,000. A bunch of word salad there. So check out the page, subscribe to the page, hit like on the video, and sign up for your Underdog accounts. I'll check you guys later on this week.